How's it been on the actual walk? Physical left turn?
Good. He does good. Like when we're doing it, he'll get. If I walk for like a long time without doing it, sometimes he gets distracted. But we're just I think like kind of yesterday, so the pole, and then like so I can catch it by like paying attention before he's actually seeing because I'm shocked on speed. But I try to do the breaks to like beginning, middle, and end.
Okay.
So I think he's starting to understand that now.
Yeah.
And I just have to kind of stick with that. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like getting like he's learning the structure of okay, I'm gonna get an opportunity to walk.
Right.
Okay. So on that last one, you know why it was a little awkward? It was good, but it was
my left leg went first.
no, you actually was correct.
I did?
I believe so. Yeah, when I saw it was correct. It's just he tends to go be a little back or a little to the side, right? So if he's too far to your left, when you're crossing like this, he's here.
He's already farther.
As opposed to being here when you ran in front of him. Okay? So ideally you want him in closer, but I can see he's doing everything well. He just happens to be a little bit more spaced out. Is when you make that right turn, you just want to make sure to commit to it and just like pull through or push through. Because eventually he can still see you, right? He can still see you here. It's just not enough yet where you're thinking like, oh, maybe I should put the brakes on so that mountain transition. Okay? So we're going to do a couple more of those left turns and then we'll move on to the default.
Okay. Deal. Really distracted.
You're good. Keep forward. You're good. Good turn. Good. All right. Questions about that? All right. Your pivots look good. The 180 right turn, so that was fine. It's always left turns that you can cover it. So let's go on a powder long leash here, and we will walk over. You're fine. No, you're fine. Okay, we're gonna walk over to this little. Oh, we can go over there. A little space in the grass. It's all muddy over here. Side. Now, do you care if your leash gets a little dirty?
No.
Alright, what about the front one? So what you're going to do is you're going to clip your blue leash to the same ring as your black leash is. So you're going to have two leashes on, okay? Like it's you, Bill.
It's the blue diamond or whatever from Titanic.
You want me to take your bag for you?
Yeah.
Heart of the Ocean? What was it called?
Yeah, is that what it was?
I don't know.
Alright. So, what we're going to do here is let me show you your blue leash. So the reason why we have two is at some point Leroy here might get savvy to the exercise. Is that he's going to start prematurely running between us. So the short leashes, if you have someone to help you, they can hold on to him so that we can actually practice the recall. Now, the way we're going to practice today is not realistic, but it's the foundation of it. And then I'll give you a more realistic way of actually applying it. So, one thing here is you're going to be away from Leroy, you're going to be at the end of your leash here.
The black one?
The blue one. Yeah, so right now I'm just showing you. So if I start to pull, like right here, the slack, right? And if I go right here, I can feel tension on his collar. So when you hit the end of the leash, you're going to be pulling it until you feel that tension. And we're going to time that tension with the remote. Because we're not going to say any words here. You want to teach them that tapping. It's capture ambulance. Is you want to time that tension with the remote to direct it. Okay, because he's not going to know right off the bat, like, oh, mom's having an issue with the toe. So we're going to use that to direct him. I find it easiest to right-handed. So what I do is I keep the remote here. So I'll use this or my thumb to press the button. And these fingers I'll use to pull the leash out. So just stack here. Okay, I'll have the leash like this, have my fingers like this. So as Leroy's coming to you, you'd be pulling the leash back like this just to take up the slack. Okay? Now don't worry about taking it all up. You just want to take some up so that this way, when he arrives, sometimes in the beginning the dog will overshoot. So if you leave it completely slack, he's going to overshoot 30 feet. So if you're taking it up, it just makes it easier for both you and him to think or how to figure it out. When we do this, this is like the most coordination heavy, so you're not going to remember everything at once, okay? But, so I have my hand here, okay, is once you stop, and you're not going to move anymore, Leroy's here or whatever, is with your hand, you take your hand, you're going to go like this, okay, and you're going to go like this, so that you're locking your leash here. So when you come to a stop, for whatever reason, like Leroy decides to choose a squirrel or like just run off the other way, you're not going to feed that leash through your hand. So had people hold it like this, and the dog starts running, and they think they can get a grip on it, and it just burns right through. Okay? Yes. So we want to lock it, and when we lock it, he might pop you a little bit, but it's not going to feed through. Okay? So I just get in that habit. Every time I come to a stop, I'll just reel them in, I'll lock it, reel them in, lock it, whatever. So we prevent that from happening. When you're doing that pullback to direct Leroy and you're tapping, once you start to see him moving towards you, you're going to also move backwards. Okay, just about 2 to 3 steps. As long as he's moving towards you, you're fine. If he comes to a stop where he starts to detour, you would pivot to face Leroy, start tapping again, and also start moving away from him. Okay, so you will always be facing Leroy, but always moving away from him. Okay. The away movement is very important. It's what gets them to attach to you, to learn like, oh, I should be focusing on something. Most of the time when people call their dogs in the park, they'll say like, come, and they're standing still and the dog will look at them, and then they go back to playing, right? Because there's nothing drawing them. But then when the owner starts to leave and walk away from the situation, like they'll say like, oh, the dog's scared, I'm going to abandon them. I'm like, no, it's because now you're moving, so now you're giving your dog something to attach to, okay? So that movement is very important. I, to this day, do that with my dogs because it's like a visual cue for them of you see me moving backwards and you turn. So if he should be out of earshot, even though he can't hear you, he feels the collar and it tells him like you need to return. And when he sees you doing this, he knows, oh, okay, mom's calling me. I should go to mom. Okay? Questions? So the main things to remember.
Lock it.
Yeah, lock it. But it's really that tension and the tapping and the moving backwards, okay? And then we'll start.
I'm not at the end of the leash, right?
Yes.
Oh, I am.
Yeah, so you're going to be, so go ahead and hold that black leash. So you would be like here, so like it's slack, right?
Oh, okay.
And I would pull it, and like right there when I feel tension is when I would start tapping and moving away from him, okay? And then as he moves to you, you're just feeding in that leash, just in case, and then locking it just in case he goes. But no worries, everybody fumbles the first few. You'll get it. Okay? And then what's your number right now?
Okay, so this is at 19.
Okay.
Left hand I'm keeping this in or right?
I do left and then remote and right hand.
Okay.
And I use these fingers to feed. And you're just throwing it on the ground. Okay?
Got it. Okay, so I just walk back.
So start to put some tension. Yep, tap, 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 back. Now feed the leash, back, tap. There you go. Like that. Good. And then hold right there and just feed it through. You're good. There we go. And pray. There you go. And a boy. We'll see how he does on another of the 19.
Right. Did I do it right?
Huh?
Did I do it right?
Yes, you're correct. Tap. Tap. Good. And back through. 1, 2, That's good right there. And break. Good. Let's go ahead and bring it down. Good boy. Every time you walk away with me, that's what that happens. Tap, tap. Good. Hold right there. Yep, good. And break. Good. 2 more. And we'll come a little bit more this way. Come here, you. That's good right there. Go ahead. Tap. 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 There you go. Through. Tap. Good right there. And hold. Attaboy. Good. One more. Wait a moment. Wait. What's up? Pull. Tap. Tap. And back. Reel it in. Yep. Right there. That's good. Good. And break. Good boy. We're going to bring him forward. Yeah. We're going to walk up here. Before I let him relax for a moment. So here you can already see him getting hesitant. Because he's like every time Jesse walks away, Mom is calling me, so now if I can stay with Mom, I can have a problem. I see it happen all the time. Okay? So that's why when I do this, I do the 2 leashes, if possible, so that we can just force the disconnect. Okay. If he starts like in that last, like the 4th one, he started crying a little bit, just ignore it. I feel like
he just ran. I didn't even have to tap. He ran towards me pretty much.
For that last one?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's already getting used to it.
Okay.
So, but the one prior to that, when I started walking away, he started like turn around and like he yipped.
Right.
Was because he already knows it's going to happen.
Scary.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're going to put in energy, like I'm like, come on, let's go. Right. It's like it's upbeat, it's neutral. Not so much to console him, but just to like tell him like there's nothing. Like, don't even to worry about it. Don't worry about it. So then, if when you're working with anybody, make sure to don't try to console him because that will reinforce the frustration. Because then he's thinking, I should feel like this. Okay, whenever we pet a dog, I know the intention is console, but the dog perceives it as do that again. So then if he's freaking out when I'm pulling him, I'm like, it's okay, buddy. He's thinking, you want me to keep freaking out.
Right.
And that's what he'll give you. Okay? So what we're going to do here is same process, but now we're going to flip it, is instead of putting that pressure and tapping, you're actually going to let the leash be a little bit slack like it was. You're going to tap first a couple of times, and we're going to see if Leroy, with just the tapping, will begin to move towards you. Okay, now super important that you do get the tapping in, because we want, there's a number of things that I know or I expect to happen when doing recall stuff, and the biggest thing is confusion or panic. If he gets confused or if he panics, he's most likely going to want to run away. And we want to work through all those things, because if we don't, then your obedience or the recall command is not fully functional. And then if something happens, then we're in a bad spot, right? So I'm kind of training for that kind of context. So right now we're still not saying anything, we're just conditioning and seeing when you feel the tap, will you respond in return without any kind of guidance? Now, if you're tapping and he doesn't know what to do, after 2 to 3 taps, you would then add the leash tension and continue tapping, and that movement back to help direct him. So it's coming in afterwards, okay? So we're trying to get it to the remote. If he doesn't get it, then we add in that little extra help there, okay? All right. Yeah. Yeah. And now tap as your back. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Good. And now reel in. Good. Hold right there. Good. And break. All right. Let's try it a few more times. Good. 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 Attaboy. Break. Break, break. Yep. There you go. Good. 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 Two more. You got it. Attaboy. Good. Good. And one more. Better. Good. And break. Attaboy. Right? And with the break, we're going to bring it forward. Break it. So that last one was what I was looking for. I saw him feel tap, and then right away, now that tension. Okay? We're going to do a couple of more to see if you'll get it without that tension, and then we'll move on to the next one, okay? Right? Good. 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 Come on. I know. Good. Good boy. Good. And break. And break. Good. We'll let him rest for a moment. We're going to process what's going on there. So I don't know if it was the last one or the second to last one that we just did, but did you see when you tapped them, he actually moved towards me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the confusion.
Okay.
So what can happen, and the super common with remote collar, is for the dog, like let's say you're here, Leroy's at that tree, and the tree behind it, right? I'm sorry, Leroy's at the tree behind it, and that's like some random person. If you call Leroy, he'll most likely go to that person.
Closest.
Yes. So he's thinking, how fast can I shut this off? Oh, you're right here. And then he'll go to that person instead. So if you keep promoting him, what will happen is he'll like literally start jumping on the person. Like, how close do I need to be? So what I do, or I have my clients do, is if the dog makes that mistake, technically he thinks he completed it. You're just going to go for the right person. Right? So I do another recall. So I'd say, Leroy, come. He comes, but he goes to the wrong person. So I go, okay, he thinks he did it. Call him again and tell him, nope, over here. Okay? Because if you try to correct it and make him work through it, he's literally going to climb the person. Okay? So I either do that or I'll go and I'll like grab the dog. But that's something where working with another person helps teach Leroy how to disengage off of people, because it's disengaging from what he's doing, and then if he attaches to somebody, then it's disengaging off of that person.
Right.
Okay, so having someone to help does help with that concept. Okay, especially if you're working with him going to each of you, because then he's learning to go to the voice and not the nearest person. Okay, but that's super common to see. Like I have another client who it was her dog and like her with like 4 other friends, and she called her dog and he kept going to one of her friends because they were in the middle of him and her. And I told her it was super common, practice for that. Questions about any of this so far? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in the words. So it'll be Leroy come. Everything stays the same. Okay, so it'll be Leroy come. And even if he does start moving towards you, you still want to get in at least 1 tap. Okay. So what can happen is if you call Leroy, right? He's running, you call him, and he turns, and then you tap him too late. What do you think would happen?
Go back to you.
Why?
You're looking at him?
Good guess, because I'm the near, like from what happened earlier. Which yes, that could technically happen.
Oh, because he's like, if it's too late, he's like already not doing.
Yeah, he's thinking exactly.
Yeah.
He's thinking that he did something wrong,
Yeah.
right? Because you called him, he responded, and then the tap came in late, so he goes,
It's like,
"Oh,
where do I go?"
yes."
Okay.
So at this stage, and for like the next couple of weeks, every time you call Leroy when you're practicing, you're always going to set up that, or always make sure you tap at least that 1 time to force that issue to happen. Okay? Because most people go like, "Oh, Jesse, the dog's coming when I call him." I'm like, "That's great, but you want to do this
Right.
because sooner or later you're going to mistap or tap too late, or something, or the dog's going to misread it, and you're going to cause that confusion." So that this way we work through that now while he's still in the long leash. So if you're practicing with them, every day, and you do like 10 recalls every day, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to more than likely see it. So if that happens, Leroy Tom, I tap too late, he starts to go off the opposite way. You would just then keep tapping and pull and move back as you're tapping. We wouldn't call him again, okay? Because we always say our commands 1 time and then we just reinforce them. Otherwise, if you reset the command, it's totally new to him. It's not the tied to the original, which was, "Hey, come over here," and then you tap and you go, "Oh, that was wrong." You're like, "Nope, that was correct." You just didn't keep it back. Okay. So I try to push my clients as much as possible to use that remote because, realistically speaking, if he's off leash or gets off leash, that's going to be your overlap.
Okay.
The more you use it now, the more likely to be able to use it. Okay. Nobody. Come here, bud.
Am I doing loose or tight?
Still loose. Come here. Yeah, so you'll keep it like that. So same thing like you were, just the tapping, no tension. But now you're going to cue the word first before the tapping happens.
Should I say name or come?
I usually do dog name, then come.
Okay.
So,
Leroy, come.
yeah. There you go. And back. 1, 2. That's good. Very good. Right.
You did good. Okay.
Everybody does that. The important thing is to spot yourself.
Leroy, come.
Right. Good. That's better. Come on. Come on. Attaboy.
Leroy, come.
Better. Yes, more. Right.
go.
Good. And one more, then we'll give a break. Perfect.
Here I come.
Right, good. Good. Very good. And break.
Great.
Good, and we'll walk them over. So do you see on that last one, it was really good.
Yeah.
What did you, there's two things that I saw that I liked.
That I did.
That Leroy did.
Oh.
And then you did. Give me some credit.
I don't know.
You did that
I walked back.
Huh?
They walked backwards.
Well, you've been, all that's been good. That's been really good with,
Okay, good.
with the lead stuff.
Coordinated like that.
Yes. But what did Leroy do? He did two things in particular. When you called him,
He came immediately.
Yeah.
Still tapped him.
you did still tap, right? But when was your tap? At least I think from where I saw it,
Pretty
right?
much right when I slept.
Was it? Was there an extra one?
Not the last one, but the time before the
Okay, so what about the
There
last
was one I might have done a little too late.
Yes. So I think that's the
The
last
last one, yeah.
So the last one, you said Leroy come. He actually turned and started going, and you tapped too late,
Yeah.
which was what we wanted to happen. And I saw him go like this, from the twitch, he went like that, but he kept going forward. Those are two things that I like. Okay? One, for the recall, we have two aspects to it. We have the turn and the return. So the turn is if like Leroy's actively engaged in something and you call him, how fast does he disengage? Okay?
Oh, yeah, because you want that.
Right.
Yeah.
Then the return is how fast does he come back to you. Okay, so those two things are very important. Right now we're working on the turn. Leroy coming, right? Then it was just a delayed tap, which is why I say tap every time, because that's going to happen. He felt it, but he just kept going forward, right? He didn't turn back or anything. Now, him getting confused and going the opposite way wouldn't be a bad thing. It just goes, yeah, it shows us we do have to work on that.
Right.
Okay? So, I don't like when I see a dog, how to say, where all these things happen and they always do well, because then the owner never sees the mistake and doesn't learn how to fix it, or we don't get a chance to fix it. Okay? So I'd rather him make the mistakes so that we can tweak all those things. Because once you're on your own and you're working with them, it's you got to figure that stuff out then. Okay? But otherwise, that last one that we just did was the best one out of all of them. He turned right away, right on the cue, and then there was a delayed tap. He felt it, he still kept moving forward. I like his closeness. So when I do the recall, I don't want, like if I called Leroy, I wouldn't want him landing here. Okay? Now when people typically do this, they'll the dog from here and then go point and look at the dog. And I'm like, oh,
Right.
but they're over there, right? Like I'm doing part of the work. And I want him in your immediate space. So he's doing a really good tight recall. I don't care where he lands. Right, left, front, back, between your legs, in my immediate space. Yes, within 2 to 3 feet. Okay. The reason for that is the more, the closer he is on the return, the less likely he is to go back to what he was doing. Okay. So if he's playing with some dogs, and you're like, Leroy, get over here, and he comes back, we don't get that preemptive shoot off where they'll go back and play with the dogs. He's going to go, my job is to stay with mine. Okay. So that's why we're also saying break. When I'm going to go get him, I'll say break.
Yeah.
Is just like with every command, sit, stay, come, place, heel. When you give the cue, it stays in effect until you cue that break. Okay? So if you call Leroy, he comes to you and he waits there. So if 3 minutes goes by before you say break, he should stay put. I don't care how or where, just that he stays put within my immediate space. So he could get up and then walk around me and come to my right side because he's still within that boundary. But what I don't want is he gets up and starts to move away from me. Okay? And there's going to be a second half to this, but this is the first half just to start practicing the foundation of it. Okay? Question so far?
Well, if I shouldn't praise him until he comes to me, right?
Once he's landed.
But what if he never lands? And if hear me tap him or walk away and tap?
Yes. Yes. So like, let's say that happened, right? Leroy comes.
I think there was a dog or something, and he eventually sat, but he was facing the other way.
He was. Now that doesn't matter too much because he was still in that immediate space. He just happened to be that way. Okay. Now let's say if I'm working with a dog that I know is very impulsive, and like you noticed, he was looking at the dog.
Right.
And if we know that becomes this, then once he landed, even though he's close, I would have tapped him. I wouldn't say anything.
Turn.
You could.
Or I guess just keep coming because he was already the opposite way. If he was facing that way and I tapped him, I should be walking away.
Technically,
Yeah.
you have two options. One would be if he faces this way, right? So he was this way, you were this way.
Right.
So what you would have done is, remember, you always want to be facing him, is that you wouldn't walk this way, because this would look like a heel. You would actually do this, and now you're facing Leroy,
Oh, I see.
and then tap and move back to get the attention. Okay, that is one approach. The other approach would be if Leroy's facing this way, you would stand still because he's already there. You would tap him, and you wouldn't say anything. And what would happen is you would turn and actually do this because you're telling him, "Don't worry about that dog over there." Okay, and he'll get it because he's because every other time you called him, I think he was either across you or facing in the same direction of you. Right? That's how dogs are aware of these things. And then you notice that one where it's like, yeah, that dog distracted him, so he was facing that way. So when you tap him, his response should be like, oh, okay, not just pay attention to that dog.
Yeah.
I'm going to go this way. Okay? So that would be a second option. There's no right or wrong there. But definitely, if he gets too far away from you, you do always want to turn to face Leroy, tap, and move back. But you wouldn't say come again because you're fixing the first one,
Okay.
right? Because you didn't perform it correctly. The other reason why I don't like accepting the spaced out return is what ends up becoming is he'll start running towards you and like he'll start to slow down, like he's going to stop here, and then they pick back up and they keep going.
Right.
Okay, so it becomes a takeoff.
Seen that before.
Yes, so that tight return of hey, you get your butt as close as possible, again, prevents all that stuff from happening. Okay. Questions? So when it comes to practicing this is not realistic. Like no one's going to be holding Leroy for you and going, oh, your dog, right? He's going to be actively doing something. Typically when people issue the recall, the dog is chasing something, running towards something they shouldn't, or running away. So it's almost always some kind of away motion, or they're distracted. They're playing with dogs, or chasing a squirrel, or whatever it is, which I can't remember. Does it play drive?
He fucks with bunnies, but not squirrels.
Okay.
Yeah, so bunnies he gets pretty wants to run after them, but
Okay.
besides that, squirrels
Not a stick.
not quite.
Okay.
Not something that I would think is a problem.
Okay, so let's say squirrels, right? Let's say we go to a spot and there's plenty. I'm not squirrels, rabbits. Let's say let's go to a place where there's rabbits,
Right.
and you see his intent. Like, hey, what's that, right? I have my long leash. I clip it to him. I hold the handle, and I go, okay, Leroy, break. And I start to walk towards the squirrels, rabbits,
Right.
towards
whatever,
rabbits,
I
right?
get it, yeah.
and I let him have it. Get excited, run, go through there and stuff, and you could either call him as he's going there, right when he just arrives there, or as he's been engaged for 2 to 3 minutes in that activity. Okay, so you're doing it at different points. So you're using it to your advantage. Now, so if I get a dog that has really good prey drive, it's great because I can use it both as a distraction, but then also as a reward. Okay, so then I can call him away from it, and then go, okay, buddy, break, go right back to the rabbits again. And think, okay, cool, right? So he's learning this is not completely off limits. It's just if mom says something, when I'm in that task, I can't do this, but if she says break, I can do it. Okay, so I'm just harnessing that prey drive. So if I let him harass the rabbits and be in the bushes and stuff, and I'm just waiting there for 2 to 3 minutes or whatever, the longer he does the activity, the more disconnected he gets from you. So that's why I like to let them have it for a while, and then Leroy come. Okay, so then if you call him and you tap him and he right away turns around and returns to you, then I go, cool, he's got a very, very solid concept. He's still got practice, but it tells me where he's at mentally. And then the purpose of practicing at different points is because the distraction is kind of like momentum. If he sees it and just starts going, like it's like a car just getting ready to speed up, then he's going faster, and then he's there, right? Is doing it at different points makes it more applicable in other settings. So if he's start the pursuit or in pursuit, that's the same thing as like him running away, him just starting to like run towards the street or something.
Yeah.
It's that away motion that you're practicing with.
He pulls harder when he sees people. He knows that.
Oh, sure.
So that's his thing.
Okay. So even like people,
Yeah.
like you can use that to your advantage as well. Don't do it too much because then it's going to be like me. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can toss it in just randomly. You know, maybe someone's going to meet you at the park, and then you have the end of the leash, and then like, he sees them and they're coming towards you, and he goes right, and I can practice a recall, and then I can reward him with the break and let him go to that person.
Right.
Okay. So again, I'm not opposed to these things. I just like to use them to my advantage.
Right.
So, let's say you go somewhere and you're solo, and you start to have issues with him leaving you, because that's what can happen. Is because if you practice too many times, he gets paranoid. So kind of like right now, he picked up the pattern of like Jesse grabs the leash and walks away, and then I get tapped.
Right.
Okay, so he's caught on to that pattern. So when you do practice by yourself, you don't want to drill it a million times because he won't want to leave you. He's going to think, oh, we're going to go to the park. And
It's already a problem.
exactly. Oh, really?
Yeah, he's always got to be sitting on me.
So if you, but if you let him like off leash, I'm assuming he like does his doggy thing or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I wouldn't ever let him off leash here.
Right.
Like, if I was at a dog park, I would do it.
Sure.
And if he sees me, like, grab the leash and leave, he would come.
Okay.
I wouldn't have to say anything. He would see me, he would leave. But if I was like if there's a dog that I see that starts growling, I'm like, Leroy, come here, he won't come. He's like, what's going on with this guy, or whatever, or he wants to play. So.
Sure.
And then I'm like, he would probably fight them back, and I'm not trying to break up the fight today.
Right. So that's where it would come into play.
Right.
Okay, and then I'll talk about how we handle those situations too. Because it actually happened to a client here at this park.
Okay.
So you're using everything that you have to practice, and then you're not letting him off leash. You're just
Right.
holding on to the end of the leash,
Okay.
and then just letting him be Leroy. You know, having that freedom.
Yeah.
So like if
We were
every
in the suburbs last night this morning. My dad lets him run around. He said he came immediately when he called him. And I was like, I think they give him too much credit. Yeah.
Well, the way I think of it is, like, I get a lot of people that are like, oh, my dog comes 98% of the time. I'm like, it's the 2% that's going to be a problem.
Right.
Right? Like,
Well, that's why I'm like, there's a mean German Shepherd. If he's going there, he's running towards them.
Sure.
What are you going to do? You can't run. So.
right.
You know.
Right. So that's that 2% we're accounting for. So we're just making what is already naturally, good. I'll give them a little bit of credit.
Right.
Foolproof. Okay.
There's
So
also no one out at 5 in the morning out in the
sure.
suburbs,
Yeah,
so-
and there's that context too, right? Like if, like you said, if there's a dog growling or something,
Right.
like that's the variable. So, but you would practice it like like any other dog, or any other client that would have practice with their dog.
Okay.
And it's just I go to the park, I go Leroy break, I hold on to the leash, and I just let them do a doggy thing. So if you're there for like 15 minutes and you do that every day, like the first time I might give them a full 15 minutes, it'd just be Leroy, and like hang out and run around, and I call them once at the very end, and then I leash them up and then we leave. Then the next time I might call them a couple times, and then 5 times, and then 1 time, and then 1 time, and then 3 times. Like I'm randomizing how many times I call him in those short times, or whatever length of times you do, so that he doesn't pick up a pattern. Because if you go and you do it 20 times, every time, he's not going to be guaranteed. Okay? So I'm not trying to make him overly paranoid. Now, if it does happen, despite you trying to make it, not so drilled out, is then you have to fix it, and then we have to create comfort. With the comfort in the I can be away from mom and not worry about is she going to call me. So then you just, you go out there and I just ignore the recalls and I just let them wander, and instead of calling them, I might just reel them in with the leash and leash them up and leave until I start to see them get that balance of like, oh, okay, cool, like I can be free. But then right when you see that, you wouldn't say come, because then you're going to go right back to where you were, and you have to go there a few times of him just being nice and relaxed before you reintroduce it, okay? So that makes recall the longest command for people to teach,
Right.
because it requires you to go somewhere. You have to have something or someone to work with, like distraction, someone to help. But then also you can't drill it too much, because if you do, then he's going to get too paranoid. He's not going to want to leave your side. Okay, so that's why I try to teach it as early as possible to give people the time to practice it. But almost always, it is the longest, it's the longest time to teach.
Okay.
unless you conveniently live across from a field or a park. Yeah, so
I have a backyard though. I can do it in.
you can do it in the backyard. That will help, at least do some kind of foundation. But then your training is only as good as the environment you practice it in, correct? But it'll still give you good foundation, okay? And there's stages to this. So like right now we're in the long leash stage. You're holding on to the end, you're using it, you're feeling it. Then the next stage is leash dragging. Then we go to no leash enclosed area to no leash unenclosed area. Okay. Then the other factor is like the human. How confident or comfortable is the human with their dog's obedience?
Right.
Okay. So I've had people that I'm like, man, your dog is awesome. They're off leash trained. They're great. They're like, I don't know, I don't trust the dog. I never trust the dog. Okay.
That's probably me.
Yeah. So what typically happens is the dog is trained.
Okay.
The owner isn't ready. So I just tell them, keep practicing.
Yeah.
And then months go by, a year goes by, and then they're like, oh wow, like I do have a lot of control, and he's very responsive, and I'm not worried anymore. And then they, utilize what they're able to do.
Right.
But I've learned not to rush people. The biggest thing that I've learned over the course of like 10 years of training people is I've had clients, one class already walking their dog off leash. Okay. And I'll tell them like, that's awesome, but we got a lot of stuff like you're like, right? Like,
okay.
So, I go, great. Now the only reason why I'm not worried about it is because they're so confident in it, because they're confident in the remote. They're confident in, if my dog does make a mistake, I'm going to make them come back. Whereas the people who don't have that confidence tend to panic and try to chase their dog down as opposed to jumping to the remote, which is what I mentioned earlier. The reason why I'm trying to get you to use this as much as possible is because in an emergency setting, I want your first instinct to be remote.
Right.
And I've had at least 3 clients in the past month have something happen and they panicked. And they chase the dog instead of going for the remote.
Yeah.
Okay. So
It's not that brand.
so I know what to expect, and that's why I tell people. And it's funny because they're like, they'll say, and they're like, I should have used a remote. And I'm like, yeah, because you had the perfect opportunity. Especially, I get it if it's an emergency setting, like just get the dog, right? But if it's like, like I'm in the middle of a field and there's nothing around us, sure, I'm going to use that remote to make my dog return. But it's everybody panics and freaks out, trying to chase the dog down. So
Good.
it happens.
Not
Okay.
alone on that one.
When you do hold the end of the leash, most people are the panic type. Is if Leroy's at the end of the leash, you want to hold. I did show you this. If you put the loop over your thumb, hold it like this. Okay. So again, if he tries to just book it, that locks your leash. He's not going to rope burn or get out of it, slip out. So I'll be walking with him. I'm like this. I'm nice and secure, and I'm just like enjoying a nice little wandering walk with him. And if something catches his eye and he books it, he might pop your arm a bit, but he's not going to rip it out of your hand. He's not going to let it go. Okay. Questions?
I thought of something unrelated to the recall.
Okay.
That dog walked by, but he was on a break. He does fine walking past dogs if he's on heel, and if he kind of goes ahead of me, even though they're walking past me, I'll tap him a bit because I can't really turn around.
Sure.
Which he does fine with that. He kind of keeps going, but then he was on a break. A dog was coming, and he lunged a bit, and I didn't have it in the hand to be like tapping.
Sure.
But what would you do in that? Should I be tapping him if he's doing that?
Correct.
Yeah.
So let's say he's on a break, right? So break is you're free,
Right.
but there's still rules. Like you still can't lunge a dog, you still can't do this or whatever, right? So then let's say he's on break, you see a dog coming, I would just preemptively already be hand on the remote or hand ready to turn up the dial and stuff. And then the moment you see any tension from him, so if Leroy's looking and as the dog's approaching, and all of a sudden he starts like kind of lean forward,
tap
right there.
Okay.
People tend to wait for the lunge before they correct.
So when we walk, when he's going ahead of me, I'll start tapping him and he kind of snaps out of it. But he was on break and I was like...
Yeah, no, because it's like kids. Like,
right.
You can go to the park and scream and yell and run around, but you still can't bully other kids.
He was fine until the other dog slowed down, and then he was like,
sure.
No.
Sure, yeah. And you can teach, like, let's say the other dog's slowing down and staring and being intimidating, you can teach him to ignore that. Now, it makes sense of why he would respond to that, right? But it's like with me growing up, my mom was like, if someone calls you names or bullies you or whatever, tell an authority. if you can't, right? And then if it becomes too much, or if you're alone and they're going to hurt you physically, you can defend yourself.
Right.
I look at it the same way. So if a dog ran up to him and started attacking him, I would let Leroy defend himself, and I would help Leroy. If a dog is walking by and being a jerk to him, doesn't mean he can reciprocate.
Right.
Okay, especially if I'm there and I can control him in the situation.
Okay.
You know, so that's how I look at it. Just like kids, the 3 to 4 year old kid, and then it's not going to make him ruin like hate his brakes or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's just like
it was just like I didn't really know how to get that under control.
Yeah.
In that moment.
Ideally, the moment you see it, you catch it, right? Because so for Leroy or for dogs, let's say you tap him at the lunge and he does stop, okay? But for him, it's worthwhile to go up to that point and take the hit, okay? But if you catch him right when he's thinking about it and you remote him there, he goes, oh, I can't even think about being reactive.
Right.
That's not even worth it, okay?
And that's what he does seem to do when we're actually walking in heel.
Okay.
So I think that was just like a random
Off
circumstance,
chance,
but
for sure.
I was like, I didn't even, it's like whatever. I dragged him in.
Yeah, so what I would do is assume. Anytime you
Okay.
see a dog, just assume there might be reactivity.
Okay.
And watch Leroy. He's your responsibility, right?
Right.
So I'm watching him, and if I start to see like his little goofy face start to get a little serious,
Yeah.
I would remote right there.
Okay.
And then it should redirect him and maybe start sniffing and stuff. That's fine. Or like let's say the dogs, I've had it where the dog seems fine, and at the very last second, the other person's dog will lunge.
Right.
You know, so then you're already prepared for like, oh, okay, and you can address him. Okay, those are the hardest parts of reactivity to address because they're so abrupt.
Right.
That's why you want to just assume it's going to
I
happen.
can tell when he gives like warning signs for sure.
Sure. Other questions? Okay, so we're going to do a few more of the comes with the tap and to see how he does. Yeah, he doesn't want to. Then he's going to do I'm up there.
Your buddy, right?
And this is okay with the leasher?
Okay. Leroy, come.
Tap, yep. Back tap, good. Hold right there. Good, and praise. And what we're going to do, because I noticed on some of them he wasn't sitting, right?
Yeah.
Is you were using your hand to push his butt down. What you can do now is if he doesn't sit, give the tap, and that should push him into the hole.
Okay. Sorry. Here I come.
Right, good. And back. That's good. That's good. Attaboy. Somebody.
Here I come.
Good. Very good. Now let's try this. Go ahead and let that black leash go. Hold your blue leash at the end. I'm going to test something out here. And you'll hold it in your right hand so that the leash is kind of dragging behind you. Okay? And go ahead and just say heel and walk with Leroy toward you.
Walk towards you.
Correct.
Like on the other side.
Correct.
Heel.
Good. I'm going to slowly stop here. Yep. Yep. So turn the face him, back tap. There you go, hold right there. Good. So what I was seeing here is by now you're able to do heel with the long leash and he should be here. But because it started out kind of slow, he was spaced out. He did catch up, and then you came to a stop, you'll stand and you tap them and you'll okay, which is not correct.
Right.
He should have put that butt down.
Okay.
Okay, so that gives me an idea of what his concept is of the heel.
Okay.
So I would definitely be a bit more strict about it.
Okay.
To fix this whole gap here, you would leave. I like how you had your leash slack here. How you're holding it was all correct. That was all good. Is what I would do is to try to get him to come in closer. I would speed up and tap, and this is on the short leash, to bring him in. Okay, so you're trying to keep him here as much as possible. Usually about 6 inches. Anything more than that's too much. Okay.
I think sometimes I don't realize he's like farther ahead of me than he should be when I'm walking in the field. Because he's like here, and I'm like, he's doing what he's supposed to do, and like he does, I'll like slow down if he stops, but I think that I realize that he's too far ahead.
Yes. So most people, when we talk about heel, judge it by
Like
the
his
dog's
head should be right here.
right shoulder to left leg. That's your visual cue. So
Here?
yeah. So go to stand right next to him. Take one little step back. There we go. Right.
That's
So
it.
that would be heel, right? So you're parallel. So it's like if you're walking next to someone, right? Your shoulder to shoulder, you're talking.
Right. Okay.
Same thing for Leroy. So your foot
Yeah,
should.
he would be like here.
Okay. Yeah. So.
Which I thought that was okay, but no. Okay.
No, okay. So I'm going to explain all that. So most people judge heel by like, oh, but my dog's not pulling, or they're not pulling that much. And heel's not about not pulling. Heel's about placement. Right shoulder to left leg. Okay. The reason why that's important is one, going back to reactivity. If he's already fortunate like this, going like, oh, there's a dog, and you have to tap him to go back, then it's already too loose. It should be when you cue heel, you can walk by dogs and we don't even get that in the first place.
Right.
That's the idea here. So that's where that tightness comes into play. But then also, if the owner wants off-leash obedience, if the heel is not that tight, there's the risk, like you saw right there.
Right.
He just goes off.
Okay.
There's that
That
risk as
makes
well,
sense.
right? Now, for you, the most important thing that you'll probably get from this, aside from like addressing reactivity, is the recall, right? So you may not care so much about how tight that heel is, but everything works together. Okay. So if the dog knows 5 commands and 4 out of 5 commands is lenient or lax, that 5th command is lax, right?
Okay.
So the owner might only care about the calm, but I'm like, but everything has to be in unison. Otherwise, the dog's going to be, they're not going to be reliable. So that's how I think about that.
Okay.
So so I would definitely tighten up that heel. And it's simple. If he's getting too far to the side, you just speed up. You tap to bring him in closer. You can also play with that number. I think last time I saw you was like
If he's too far, tap him too.
correct.
Because I think he would either be too far in either way. And
Yes,
then he'd
that's what I've
slow
noticed.
down and he'd be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Now he's like, I can't miss you if I'm behind you.
Correct. Now from if he's lagging, like let's say you went on the hour walk and he's lagging, like I get it. He's tired. He's not doing it. Because whatever. But if he's right off the bat just being lazy, then I go, yeah, that's not good. Okay.
Okay.
So, I get it on the scope of like what dogs do. That's bad. We're like,
Well,
oh,
it's
this is
just so
pretty
much
good.
better from what he was doing that I thought we were doing this.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. No, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
It's because my perception and my understanding of dogs is like, no, you have to have it to this degree, otherwise it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's why I was pointing that out because if he had a nice tight heel, like you would have like walked in and holy shit, like he's so close to me, right? Even though he's got all this leash, but he started off slow. Then he
Right.
caught up, and I was like, "Oh, good." And I had hope for him, and then you stopped, and then things just went
Okay.
stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would tighten that up.
Okay.
So whenever you tap Leroy, he should go into what he's supposed to. So when you were stopped, he should have just did this. But the fact that he went like deuces and like walked away was
There's
like
been times I've tapped him like 4 times and I keep walking and he's still like trying to swim whatever.
Sure.
So I should turn it on.
correct. Yeah, 'cause last time I think it was
I was keeping him like I had him at like 23, which for him was pretty high, and he was ignoring it. He just was sniffing at things, so I was like, that's
yes,
strange.
that's normal
Okay.
because one, dog logic is not the same as human logic because you're going by like, dude, you were like great on 16,
Right.
right? And it's like correct, but according to the context, exactly what's going on. So like, let's say a dog growling at him and he's lunging, you might be 62
Right.
before he stops. It's not uncommon. That's why I like remote because I can, if I go into a setting and I know like the dog has trouble here, last time I was at 44, they were perfect. I go right to 44. You know, and if it's like an environment that we always practice in, we get at 12, then I'm at 12. Okay. But yeah, you go by Leroy's behavior. So if you don't see a change in the 3 taps, you can bump it. I go for him, 3 levels, whatever. And then as you get used to it, it just becomes a little bit it becomes easier. You just go up the numbers now. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. We're doing pretty good. His recalls were nice. I did like his recalls. His was good. Bless you. The turns were good. All that stuff. But definitely want to tighten up the heel.
Okay.
Next class, we're going to do more recall stuff. So you want heavy long leash again. Take it from there.
Okay. Sounds good.
Awesome. Good job.
Thank you. Ready?